Here we go. It's that time of the set. It's that time of the set. It's a Dev Learnings article. Let's see what Riot has said, what they learned about set 15. And we can do a whole trial by chat afterwards to see whether or not we agree or disagree. Here we go. I think a lot of people have been waiting for this. /dev TFT KO Coliseum Learnings. This is actually hot off the press. It's released literally like 2 minutes ago. So it's like the first initial reactions. Welcome, Coliseum contenders, to our once a set deep dive into just that, the set. Our KO Learnings is a collaboration across many disciplines where we go over what worked, what didn't, and everything in between. This is a big one. You'll hear from the following people as they reflect on how the set landed. Oh, so we brought an entire committee. No Mortdog, though. We got Michael the Jin Sloan. That was the guy that introduced the set at the beginning of the set. He was like the dude that was also explaining Monster Trainer on Twitter, things like that. KO Coliseum set lead, TFTer since Gizmos and Gadgets, set designer since Monster Attack. So he joined in set 6. He's been a set designer since set 8. Tim Trucy Jiang, live designer on finalization and live team lead for KO Coliseum. Tim's been the one in charge of balance this set. And regardless of how you feel about it, I think Tim has done. He's definitely putting a lot of work towards it. Because I know that he's mainly the person talking lobby too. He's the dude that has been talking to the players, getting the feedback. Because Mort, as you guys know, did not work a lot on the set, and so someone had to step up for him. I think Tim was stepping up to the plate. He was also the guy that's posting a lot about like what, whether or not we are patching and a bunch of thoughts around it. But when they're reworking fighters, for example, he was the one posting about it. Giovanni Scarpati, lead designer of Rolls Revamp. Some claim he's a Super Thresh fan. Giovanni is also. They're really underselling how goated this guy is. Man, I'm getting Mortdogged again. Giovanni was also the guy that led set 4 and set 6 and he also was a big contributor to set 9. Some of the best sets of all time. Like basically this guy was the dude for a while. He was the man. And he's also a really fun dude to hear talk about game design if you ever get a chance. He sits with Mortdog and reflects on TFT. So Giovanni is him. Tori Arrow, gameplay art director. She's worked on everything from Little Legends to logos. Awesome. I love hearing. Our team is honestly killing it for TFT. And then Isaac Wood, art lead for KO Coliseum. Recently made the observation that Christy and Tim have the same last name, but don't believe they're related. Okay. Wait. Are they related? Wait, he doesn't believe they are related. I guess they are? Whoa. That's actually kind of interesting. Christina Xtina Jiang, product lead of events since the first Chong Shredder. A bit of a meta note. We've been doing these learnings articles for a long time now, and throughout that time, we've returned to some of the same issues that cropped up in the past. Example, bugs. This isn't to say that we haven't learned from those mistakes. We know that they're still there, but instead it's time to call out that we're continuing to work on them or add color as to why they're still appearing. The reality is that making a game isn't easy, so we'd rather continue to discuss the areas we're struggling with most and keep you updated on those ongoing struggles than ignore them entirely. Plus, there are new things to talk about in these sections too. So with that, a TLDR. Should we read the TLDR? The thing about TLDR is it kind of spoils the entire article because some people have low attention span. Well, I mean, let's just scroll past it because they basically just restate everything. And we'll do the TLDR at the end. Power-ups. The set mechanic for KO Coliseum had the goal of taking your favorite champion and giving them the ability to become your anime protagonist with sharp, strong enhancements that could be moved around throughout the game. Here's how it landed. In our survey, sent out in the first 2 patches of the set, a large portion of our player base said that power-ups made the set more fun. In fact, power-ups score above the anomaly mechanic of Into the Arcane. So a lot of people felt this was better than set 13. But below our augment mechanic from Gizmos and Gadgets, which is so popular we added to the game permanently. Overall, players who enjoyed power-ups appreciate having new ways to customize their champions with novel options like partner power-ups, Drift Duo, fan service being noted most frequently. Interesting. So the general sentiment is that the fans really liked power-ups. But as time went on, things changed. Power-ups are a dynamic and complex system with over 100 options that could be mixed and matched across more than 60 champions. There's an overwhelming amount of possibilities, and even if we got to a world where all these were somehow balanced, when interacting with other elements in the game, augments, items, and champion kits, the reality of the situation is that some powers would be far better with other champion system combos than others. That's entirely the root issue, which is TFT at the end of the day is a math problem, right? It's about how can I get this champion and get its number to be multiplied as high as possible for this power fantasy. And when you have augments multiplied by items, multiplied by, they call it kits, which is like traits, their abilities, things like that, multiplied with power fruits, it just creates this like giant power gap between the best and the second best, which is a huge gap between the third best as well. And that's kind of why the best fruits are so much better than the second tier of fruits, which is so much better than the rest. So they're assessing it properly, in my opinion. I agree with that. And while having them completely balanced may be a far-reaching goal, what should have been done better is removing the bad options such as Super Genius, a power-up bounce around Prodigy's mana regen on Karma, or Killer's Instinct on Malzahar, which sort of just gave him mana regen. On the flip side, we should have been faster at removing options that broke a champion's power sling, such as Stretchy Arms on Gangplank, Fusion Dance Darius, or Trickster Insert Melee Champion. Okay? I mean, that is also true. Getting the bad options felt really bad because it felt like the refruit thing was just basically cycling through all the bad ones and trying to get through to the good ones. If there were that many options. There were too many options that either weren't viable for too long or way too dominant, creating rigid and meta-optimized situations that hurt the fantasy of power-ups in the first place. Well said. Because we have so many power-ups that were generic, we need to be more careful that when we applied a power-up to a champion, it would need to apply a similar power level of all power-ups to the champions of that type. Having a power-up work well on one unit, but not on another the same role, dramatically increased the knowledge burden of the mechanic. That's another thing too about power fruits. There's just this is basically one of the key phrases I think that's going to define the set. There's a huge knowledge burden about the way fruits work. So much mystery, and I think it feels like this set you need to play with a fourth tab. You need to have TFT open. You need to have TFT Academy open because you can't play the game without it. You need a stats tab open, and then you need a power-up tab open to check up like all the power-ups that you could possibly get. And you're like, okay, well, my odds are 25, but what if it's stage 4? But what if I'm level 6? And I'm like, well, actually, this removes this possibility. And then there's like a bunch of like tech around that. It's like, oh my god, what happened just playing the game, right? Now, of course, some people are just like, well, you don't have to use any of those things. All you need is TFT and TFT Academy. You don't even need those other two things. And you might be right. But the thing is, it feels like if you were at a huge disadvantage if you didn't have that. So that's where I think a lot of players didn't enjoy it. It just feels like you're super behind if you just didn't have all that stuff. I mean, heaven forbid you're a competitive player playing on LAN in a couple weeks at the World Championship and you don't have any access to that stuff. An example where this went wrong could be Fairy Tail Ezreal being much worse than Fairy Tail Kog'Maw, but the fact that it offered on both champions leads you to believe that these are equivalent. Fair. This is where we need to dial in the scaling numbers on our power-ups while also ensuring our power-up lists were both intuitive with no dead options and balanced with no power-up that broke a champion. All right. So they're basically agreeing with us, and they're elaborating and they're agreeing with us. They're identifying the problem, saying these powers were definitely not balanced. It was good on this champion, and it was amazing on this champion, and it was absolutely awful and bait on another champion. Why have that be the case? Another thing Powers brought up was how much agency feels good. You had enough options where it feels reasonable to fish for the powers where you wanted, but if you missed, it would feel especially bad. We sort of cut the difference between allowing players to completely select the power up versus making them build around the few options they were giving in a specific way that augments provide. There are pros and cons to both these options, but when we examine systems like this, we need to decide more meaningfully where we ultimately stand on this continuum. Right, so what they're saying is they gave you some chances to refruit, but then if you have 4 fruit removers, and then you missed, it would feel absolutely terrible. It's almost like your augment didn't work type of thing. You're just down a set mechanic. They're talking about, like, yeah, they gave you some chances to refruit because they don't want you to guarantee the power of fruit. But if you refruit 4 times, we all saw it, right? Where, like, if you refruit for, let's just say, Gather Force on Jinx or a mech pilot, and you just, like, miss on everything, your game just feels over. So it feels like especially bad that they give you some agency, but not enough to actually feel like it was good. Assuming that it also even worked in that way. There was also a couple of things that I want to bring up later, but I want to see if they also address it. With that said, power-ups were obviously an exciting system for many of our players, so I'd be remiss if I didn't call some of the more meta learnings we've taken from the system. To do so, I'll break down the powers for one champion-specific Lucian. Frodan, I'm too slow. You speak English too fast and too good. Oh, sorry. Am I speaking too fast? Sometimes I'm going through things that feel like it's just like a lot of words, and I try to summarize it. Like, I think this paragraph basically can be summarized. We gave you 4 fruits, which we thought was enough, but sometimes it wasn't enough, and it feels bad to miss. So I'm trying to like summarize it because they're speaking in a very professional way, and I'm trying to like explain. But I understand that maybe English isn't the first language for a lot of people. Sorry. Lucian was a solid unit with a simple ability with a novel mana gaining hook. But where this champion took off was that the number of exciting power-ups he had: Solar Breath, Drift Duo, Hero's Arc, Max Marcana, Mech Pilot, Midas Touch, Over 9,000, Power Fund, Shadow Clone, Sky Piercer, Classy, Critical Threat, Stormbender, Pursuit, Magic Expert, Mage, Killer Instinct, and Keen Eye. Sorry, there I am speeding up again. Some were straightforward, like Power Font, more mana, or Critical Threat, Spell Crit. Others completely changed how you played him. Pursuit Lucian leaned into the long fights and mana regen, dashing around the battlefield. Max Arcana Lucian had you pursuing an infinite scaling reroll fantasy. Mage Lucian had Lucian casting twice, which meant even more mana refunds and thus more casts. Mech Pilot Lucian had you committing fully to the mech vertical, padding stats with items like Thief's Gloves. And then Drift Duo Lucian unlocked reroll mighty mech strategies without needing Yone and had a cool thematic like Senna and Lucian reroll. Many of Lucian's options felt meaningfully different and would give him powers in ways that weren't directly tied to more of a stat, making you want to play differently too. But for every Lucian, there was a simple Gather Force Jinx or Stretchy Arms Gangplank option, where one power-up felt like the go-to default option. When a power-up like Gather Force Jinx was perceived the best and only option, it also led to the set feeling less flexible overall. And they bolded this, by the way. You know what the keyword is? The keyword of this is perceived best and only option. I like that they slid that there because Riot's like, it wasn't the best and only option. It was perceived to be as such. Which was not the intention of the source of power that meant to be removed and reapplied. Lastly, there's something to be said about the fun power-up options we had to set, from fan service to hat trick. Some of TFT's best moments are when we lead into our shared passions for our champions, or when we lean on the absurdity of TFT to make simple things fun. Agreed. We've been thinking about this a lot when we look at new augments for a new set and mechanics for set to come. Flexibility. Oh boy, the big F word. Flexibility. So let's talk about flex play. KO Coliseum was not as flexible of a set as we would like, and while we worked to improve flex play throughout the later patches, we failed to hit the mark for many of our competitive players. But let's take a step back and define flex play. Oh boy, a philosophical discussion. For our purposes, flexibility is a playstyle that allows you to play around what you hit in your shop, your early items, and your augments. Holistically, it is playing around what the game gives you. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Not hard commit. The way TFT works right now is you have your thing, you hard commit, and you choose what to play very early on, so that way you can streamline your decisions. In general, we talked about TFT is all about multiplying things, right? Multiplying things. I'm gonna get my pen out here. So if you're trying to multiply your augments times your items times your traits times your power-ups, you really want to make sure that you're streamlining that, and the earlier you commit, the more you can kind of make that streamlined. That's basically why it's and that's usually on the opposite end of the spectrum compared to flex. On the one hand you have flex, on the other end you have committal, right? So when we think about flex play as what should be the ideal playstyle for our highest level of play, it is important to note that the other end of the spectrum, forcing, should also be somewhat viable for casual play. But at the end of the day, both playstyles just want to win. So here's where something I think is not necessarily... I don't know if that's necessarily true. I actually think that, believe it or not, casual players love flexing a lot. In fact, I think that one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I give to when I coach people is that I think they play too flexibly, because the ideal that they have in their mind is not like imagine if you're playing a strategy game where you just literally let's take a game like Slay the Spire, where you're playing like a roguelike, and if you build a deck and all you do is keep clicking cards that you think are cool because you want to like flex, like, oh, this attack card is cool and this power card is cool and this passive scaling thing is cool. It's like you have no cohesive direction, and you're like, well, I'm open to all of that. The game shouldn't theoretically reward you for never committing and making a decision, right? So in the same way, I think that there's different spectrums, there's different ranges of this kind of casual play. I don't think it's like casual players want to force and high level players want to flex. That's not true. And the inverse is true. There's a lot of high level players that want to be able to force, and there should be the ability to force things at times. Like the best version of TFT, in my opinion, this is my opinion. This is not what Riot's saying, but I think it's like everything is viable. You can play hard force, you can play flex, and even within flex, there's like wide and narrow flexing, right? And like the best version of TFT is like all of that is on the table, pending on your spot, and you have to weigh the best options and then try to go from there. So it's like it's not. I don't think that there's like I hope they don't bucket this as just like sweats want the sweaty challenger players want to flex. That's not actually true. They actually, you know, I'm just gonna put something out there. If flex became the primary way to play at the highest level, there'd be a lot of players that might have to relearn the game. But I think that, and they'd prefer to play it that way. But I do think that it's dangerous to bucket things like this. Anyways, I'm kind of belaboring the point. Now at the back where flexibility is missing Coliseum, situations like hitting 3 copies of a Yuumi in a shop and not wanting to play Yuumi 2 because you didn't already have 5 Prodigy or 5 Battle Academia highlighted just how pre-planned and rigid comp preparation needed to be. Much of this rigidity came from the power of the set's traits, but a lot of it also came from hyper-optimization from many variables KO Coliseum had. The biggest contributor to these variables was the power-up mechanic, which added another layer of choices to make limited resources on top of everything else in the regular set. It's true. If you found Zyra 2, are you replacing your Ezreal with Zyra 2? If you hit a Lee Sin 2, are you replacing like the Cassante or anything, or your Garen? And that actually was making your comp on average weaker. That's what they're talking about. It should be exciting to hit these other things, but because you had to specifically play this rigid of a structure of Battle Academia of Prodigy, that's where we had that phase like a month ago where everyone was talking about traits versus individual unit power, right? Let's dive into some of the examples of how how this play out. Yuumi's ability required ramping from mana via Prodigy, and the true damage component needed potential from the Battle Academia trait. This design dictated a narrow commitment to playing Yuumi that needed to be decided in the early stages of the game, where you can hold on to vital 1 costs like Ezreal, Garen, and Syndra, right? Because going back to find Ezreal 2, Garen 2, Syndra 2 is important but very hard to find. If you are pivoting to Yuumi, you're likely not going to hit it quickly, and that is very, very impactful. Similar cases could be seen with Monster Trainer before we worked it. More on this later. You need to field one of Lulu's monsters early so you could be with the curve on leveling it up. We'd also like to see gameplay dictated by optimized uses of early artifacts. For example, Luden's Tempest had a singular and solved holder in Ahri, so greatly warping her power that we were forced to temporarily disable it to restore power to the champion without making the combo a guaranteed win. It was already close to that. Finally, some rigidity came to our power system, which have you commit to scaling and fun fantasies like over 9,000, max vitality, etc. Right, so they're talking about basically there was the lack of flexibility could be described in a couple of ways. Your composition was very similar, but also if you found artifacts like Luden's, you only could play Luden's with 1 champion. You only can play this 1 power up with 1 or 2 champions, and it just felt like if you first, we talked about the knowledge burden. If you even knew that in the first place, yeah, and you could play that, but even if you did know that, sometimes you're presented in like very specific things, and if you weren't in a spot to actually play that, assuming that's even a fun thing, right? Sometimes you play this combo with this champion, Fishbones on Kai'Sa, and everyone's like, this is so boring because I just done this like 15 times, or I've lost against this 15 times. Assuming you even had the knowledge and you found it was fun, it didn't feel like you could do anything else. And so that's sort of the problem with the power levels is that it was only this was good with that. And then another side effect of the knowledge burden, if you didn't know Luden's was good on Ahri, and you didn't know like over 9,000 was good on specifically this champion, if you didn't know that this was the way to play it, then the game felt like there was only 2 comps. Like another thing about the set that and this is sort of like going back into my grievance, is that if you didn't know this, the knowledge checks, you legitimately thought there were only like 2 comps to play per patch because everything else was a pure knowledge check. So it's like, so you're just like, well, what can I play then? I guess there's nothing to do. And I regularly felt myself like that. I regularly felt like that myself on patches where I wasn't exactly up to speed. At the end of the day, there were a lot of smaller design decisions that made the set less flexible at high levels of play. And while in isolation, many design choices had fun outcomes. Leveling a monster was fun. Stacking random stats with the power-up is also fun. Together, they overcrowded true flex play. So, as we look to the next set, we still want to index on fun and unique hooks, but we're taking extra care to make sure our traits feel viable at lower breakpoints, allowing for wider gameplay, and our champions feel viable without deep and specific investment. We can also absolutely guarantee there will be far more flexible champions in the next set. Whoa! And that's bolded. Far more flexible champions in the next set. You know, the thing is, there were a couple of flex champions this set. And they were some of the least complained about. The only time, who here complained about Cassante? Like, seriously. Like, after All Out Cassante was nerfed, it feels like no one really was like, man, Cassante is like a problem, man. He's like too good. But everyone would always say Cassante was so good, but I mean, it feels kind of good to hit a Cassante too, right? Sharp and meaningful design, reflections on artifacts. What happens when an artifact design is so sharp and you have to click it or you don't play it because it single-handedly enables? Well, in the worst case, when the artifact is that sharp, it's gotta get cut, as was the case with Luden's Tempest Ari. But this hasn't been our first awkward run-in with artifacts. It's true. In fact, ever since we introduced the new artifact lineup in set 11, and then we've retooled the roster since, we've basically had this where like a couple of artifacts are only good on one champion. There's like an old one where like there's called Corrupt Vampiric Scepter, which actually made its way back into the set, this set, where it's like it gave you couldn't really gain mana anymore, but you got like a ridiculous amount of stats, and it was like a huge penalty and a huge buff, and it was only good on like one champion every set. And so they definitely had these kinds of interactions every set. With every new set, there are new artifact combinations that we inevitably have to respond to. As partly by design, artifacts are meant to be sharper, more champion-focused items that enable specific fantasies. And Into the Arcane, we had Rapid Fire Cannon Nocturne. I forgot about that one. In Cyber City, we had Blighting Jewel Fiddlesticks. In both of those situations, we responded by nerfing the unit, but when we did, those units became borderline unclickable. It's true. For example, once we got Artifact Blender Nocturne with a range extension artifact or more, the snipers, the fishbones, the rapid fire Nocturne, base Nocturne was unclickable, even if you saw 3 copies of him early on in the shop. If you've been following along with our last section, this goes against the flexible meta. So we're slowly and slightly changing our philosophy around artifacts that prioritize the champion's viability without the artifact over the artifact. Okay, clap. Instead of buffing or nerfing a champion around an artifact with a simple numbers adjustment, we want to approach the two variables, the champion kit and artifact, with design changes that make both the power ceiling and power floor closer together, with or without the artifact. While doing so, we have a secondary goal with artifacts to further establish their power budget between core and radiant items. Okay? I can get behind all of this so far. If we accomplish both of the above, we'll also have made artifacts slightly less sharp, allowing to be better, albeit less specifically so, on more of our champion. This way, if you're offered a choice of 3 artifacts late in the game, at least one of them should work in your comp. This isn't to say we're going to nail artifacts perfectly next set. It's a good caveat, because I think that if they nail artifacts perfectly next set, then they deserve a Nobel Prize, because that is very, very unlikely to be the case. Only just because the way the artifacts are designed in their totality of their kit, not because Riot's incompetent, just that it's just really, really hard to do it based on the current design spectrum. But they could also just remove a bunch of problematic artifacts. Each set brings a ton of variables that interact with our more narrow and powerful artifacts in different ways. And the next set will be in no way immune to this fact, but we will be more ready to adjust artifact design, and we will even see a future where cycling through which artifacts are live for which sets could become the status quo. And I think that's actually where I'm at, which is like some artifacts in some sets just can't be allowed, but others are less problematic. So Fishbones in some sets, totally fine, right? And then like Fishbones was bad for a long time, and all of a sudden they started creating range units that were really abusing it because it would target like the weakest unit within their range or something like that, like Ari or Gangplank, and that was creating problems around the items in a more profound way than it was before. In fact, once upon a time, Fishbones was like the most cool artifact someone could try to make a game plan around. This was a couple sets ago, where like people would be like, "Oh my god, Fishbones is terrible! Like you're actually picking it." It was an exciting moment. So I think that it definitely is going to be the case where if they can understand which artifacts can be good, and I feel like because TFT is balanced so often, if it's just not working, just take it out and try with a different one, right? They have a lot of artifacts. Maybe bring back some support items as artifacts as well. Like, I don't think people are complaining if like a Zeke's comes back, but I guess that's not really artifact, that's support. But it's one of those things where they could probably find ways to experiment with it mid-set even. Bugs, ambitious content, and the Pioneer tax. Oh, Pioneer tax. KO Coliseum was one of our largest set in terms of sheer content volume, and while we created a ton of new content that we're proud of, it also came alongside a Pioneer tax. The cost of creating something new impacted by shifting time and resources. I think actually this is where I think it's worth noting is that this is for sure, without a doubt, one of the most ambitious sets, which is I don't think anyone can really disagree with that. I've said it a couple times. I feel like they swung so big and they missed on certain parts of it. But I applaud the ambition. Like, I think that this was... It's cool that TFT doesn't take it safe, right? Because coming from, like, Hearthstone, at a certain point, it felt like they were doing really safe things when they were printing expansions. And it just felt like it was flat. If you're bored, it's not necessarily because Riot didn't try. If you're bored of this set, it's because they missed on what they need to deliver. But it wasn't because of effort. They definitely tried to go big here. First, the content. New champions and traits and augments are all met a set mechanic with more possible combinations than ever before. With that, we had a lot more to test than past sets. A lot more combos to QA, a lot more bugs to chase down causes for, and many more novel situations that we possibly couldn't account for. Right? Which is another argument of why it might be good to restrict the number of fruits possibilities, because there's also just like a pragmatic, can we even QA all these things? But past the sheer number of content combinations, we were also testing a new development process meant to make set creation smoother and more sustainable over time. Oh, they're peeling back the curtain. They're talking about how they're making TFT sets. The idea was simple. Shift more of our planning and decision making earlier in the pipeline so we can give each stage of development more breathing room. But putting that into practice meant compressing timelines in the short term. We had to move many of our key processes, and the one that was the most impacted was our finalization phase. Ooh, this showed up in less jam days for the team, vital days where we play a set on repeat, constantly gathering feedback and correcting bugs. Well, I mean, at least now we understand why. It's just they restructured their the dev pipeline process, and as a result, QA took a huge step back. And again, this is sort of the thing where some people said, do we want... the reason why I say it again is because I brought this up last time I streamed, I think, before regionals. So someone said, like, can't they just release a mid-set, like, with the 3 sets? I feel like there's not enough content the last month. It feels like it's so dry. 4 months is too long for a set. And I think that this is only going to happen more often. They just have less time to test things and less quality passing, I think. It's very, very dangerous to be like, well, we should do 4 sets a year, or we should bring mid sets back. For KO Coliseum, it seemed like we were constantly behind on bugs, and when we thought we fixed one, a higher impact one would pop up. It sucked. We felt bad. We worked hard, and we still didn't meet the standards of our players and ourselves had. I mean, this is basically them apologizing for that. So if anybody says like Riot doesn't care or whatever, like, I mean, maybe that's how you feel, but this is them basically saying sorry. So what can we say about the future? Well, to start, we have much more finalization time for our next set and are planning plenty of finalization time for all sets moving forward. Okay, so they are adapting. How are they going to change moving forward? They're changing their dev pipeline or their dev pipeline to make sure that they can actually get back into this. Even as I write this now, the next set has already surpassed the total number of jam days we had on KO Coliseum. Great. But past jam days, we're also onboarding a new testing team that should be gradually improving in process effectiveness as time goes on. So, are they hiring new folks? Wait a second. They hired new people, or maybe they maybe there's something else that I don't even know what's going on, but interesting. Frodan, I knew it. Frodan's been a Riot employee this whole time, man. He's been on the payroll. It just makes sense. It's true, man. It's true. In fact, aren't we all, if you really think about it, aren't we all on the Set 15 QA team? Let's be real. I feel like I'm ready to come forward. I think we've all been on the QA team for Set 15. Everyone here in chat, every person that's queued up a game this set, you've been on the finalization team, because we definitely do this. We play the set on repeat. We constantly gather feedback and data And, well, okay, sorry, we don't do that. But we identify the bugs. As always, this isn't to say the next set will be bug-free. Oh, yeah. If you think the next set's going to be bug-free, I have a bridge I want to sell you. The more ambitious a set is and the more novel ground it explores, the more we have to learn to match its scope. That being said, we can say that we are taking learnings from the set seriously. And we're building an additional support structure to make sure that our next sets are more stable. They have to. They have to. Because if Riot doesn't always follow through immediately on some of these dev learnings articles, right? Some of the stuff that they say, it feels like the next set that is almost like exactly back to where we were a couple months ago. But here's the thing. If they don't actually follow through with this, there's actual a real consequence. Players are going to quit the game. Like, players are going to the most amount of players I've ever seen quit Hearthstone was when the client stopped working. And I keep bringing up Hearthstone because that's my own experience, coming from a strategy game genre where it's like a massive player base. And it's like if they just like actually keep breaking the trust of like, does this set actually function the way I think it should? Are they going to actually have quality assurance and like the correcting the bugs and things like that? If it's not a good experience, they're just going to stop giving it chances, because the reality is time is valuable for a lot of people, or like the gaming time is valuable. Not everyone wants to spend their 1 or 2 hours a day if that's all they have to play the game, to play a game that works a lot of times, not always though. To add more color on the Pioneer tax, complexity, and even our earlier section on flexibility, let's hop on a quick case study with Lulu. Whew! The Monster Trainer. Lulu, a case study for complexity. Now to talk about one of our bigger trait experiments for KO Coliseum, Monster Trainer. Monster Trainer at its core was an exciting fantasy pick. Pick your favorite monster, level it up, and watch them carry your team to success. But Monster Trainer also ended up a lesson on picking the best design goal and making it shine. Trainer shipped as a threat-like trait meant to provide utility and scaling combat power. These goals didn't mesh well, since no one was interested in fielding a weaker utility champion, and likewise, pushing so much power in utility meant there were not a lot of design space for the level up component to feel truly transformative. That's right. If you didn't find it early, it just felt like the level up was pointless, and because they were really weak, because they were balanced around their level mechanic, it felt like flexing them in wasn't really good. So in the end, it kind of felt like it was neither what it wanted to be, unless you started off with it early. In the future, it's important to identify early on what our space content fills within the set and make sure the designs have the space to truly fill those needs. Not to mention the okay, they're about to talk about the Monster Train bag size. Monster Trainer was also the source of some hard to squash bugs, such as the infamous Lulu bug carousel that eventually led to the permanent disabling of her availability on carousel rounds. These bugs felt bad to ship to players, but ultimately came the result of us pushing the systems in TFT to the limit and exploring what it is and isn't possible. Yeah, Lulu is still not on carousel. I forgot about that. That's actually something that I haven't talked about in a long time, but you can't even find Lulu or Rammus or Smolder or Kog'Maw on carousel. We tried something new. It was hard. It led to mistakes. The classic Pioneer tax. With our tight timeline, it's tough to catch all these. Missing them leads to prolonged periods of bugs. We should have done better at being transparent with players and ourselves to minimize the risk of bug reappearing with our attempted fixes. Oh, and the thing about it too is the bag size. They still haven't talked about that. There's bugs. The mechanic didn't work. It's a bag size issue. Also, I've yapped so long. The ad timing is about to kick in. B patch though. There's gonna be a B patch coming in. Oh my goodness, there's so much to read, there's so much to react. Finally, all this led to the end state of Monster Trainer, where their leveling mechanic and unique bag sizes were removed. We knew these changes would disappoint players who loved the original visions, but they helped us solve the bug and flexibility issues that were holding Monster Trainer back. These tough decisions resulted from misaligned identities and a missed experimentation with trying to support 3 champion bag sizes with 1 original champion. While it was the Admiral dream to have 1 Kog'Maw, 1 Rammus, and 1 Smolder player on their training adventure, the amount of invisible rules and subsequent player manipulation meant the information tax was too high. Lulu and Monster Trainer were awesome ideas, but they needed more polish and focus on the player experience to truly deliver on the fantasy. We won't have a Monster Trainer-like champion next set, but we also won't let this flawed experiment push away from innovative designs in the future. So it's a cool idea, right? It's a cool idea. So, you know, I like that they don't actually shy away from the ideas, because the thing is, do you guys remember set 8? And this is actually something that I want to bring up at the end of all this. But set 8, everyone was convinced that hero augments were awful. I believe everyone kept saying like this is one of the worst mechanics ever. It reduces flexibility. It makes the game very stale. It can't be balanced, so on and so forth. But hero augments were something that I think now a lot of people look forward to. Everyone look forward to hero augments every set. You know one of the things about set 7. I was going over the set 7 tier list for TFT Academy, and I was looking over and I was like, I think there's only 2 hero augments this set. For like the set revival, there's a hero augment that gives you itis, by the way, and there's a hero augment for Nasus. Am I missing anything else? I feel like there's only 2, and I was like, that's it. Is that it? There's no other hero augments. Flat has one. Okay, so like, but either way, I was like hard to find it. I need to add them more. Either way, the point that I'm trying to get at is there's probably a version of Monster Trainer. There's probably a version of Fruits. There's probably a version of a lot of things that people feel like is not working. I mean, obviously, there's a version of artifacts that are good that could be in the game, but right now, people have a hard time seeing because their media experience is bad. And I think that it's actually very classic Riot to try again, because that's usually what they do. They try again. And also part of it is because they spend time building it. It feels like you should at least try to make it work because that system already exists. If they build something like I think Fruits is a direct result of Anomalies, right? It's like the same menu. And so if Fruits are using the same menus as Anomalies, that's like something that they can create based off existing designs, right? We're talking about system designs. We're not talking about like general like balance of of traits and heroes. We're talking about like if they already create the infrastructure to do Monster Trainer, they can probably do it better next time, and the technology already exists to make sure they can iron out and have new QA. They don't have to create completely brand new in like systems and menus and everything like every single set. They can iterate on the current existing ones, which is why I think it's good that they're gonna try it again, but or try something innovative again. But we'll see. I mean, I don't think they're gonna bring back Monster Trainer though, like in its current form. Too buggy. Prismatic trait reflection. Speaking of new experiments with KO Coliseum, we tried a new way to activate prismatic traits. Instead of just requiring a certain amount of trait, we're also required a quest to be completed. Oh, prismatic traits. You know, that's actually something we never even got around to complaining to. I feel like complaining about prismatic traits
for Battle Academia
is we never even got to this point of this. I mean, I think some people did, and I guess if you're a casual like washed up League of Legends pro, you care about these kinds of things. But for the most part, most people didn't really complain about prismatics this set. I guess they're gonna do some dev reflection on this. This was an experiment worth doing. There's still potential to explore with prismatics that goes beyond emblems. Exploring this space also allows us to get more creative with the output of prismatic traits, making big cinematic moments like the crew finisher. That's true, actually. You know, the biggest ways is that it feels like the art team popped off with like the crew finisher animation, but like you only saw it like once on YouTube. Wasn't it much better for competitive? It was, but here's the thing, Marcel. That affects like, I would probably say a 4-digit number of people on the planet versus I feel like there are millions of TFT gamers that want to be piloting the crew. Like they want to see that moment, right? Like how many of you guys even saw the mech prismatic ever activated in a game? Not on YouTube because you had to search for it, but like I have never even seen it in the game. I've only ever seen it on YouTube. I've never actually seen it in the game. And the set is over. Like it's like a couple weeks, man, and set 16 is out. And trust me, I've tried many times to do it. Like at least one time it should happen. I mean, part of it was because the augment was bugged, right? And even though the crew is considered prismatic, it is, but I mean, it's like 3-star Twisted Fate. So overall, though, we're not going to call this complete success. Sure, solve problems caused too much access to Crest, Crowns, and Wandering Trainer, but we won't be repeating this for every trait in the future, just reserving it for some of our more spectacle-focused moments. I do think it was healthier for balance. You know what? If you're a player that plays hundreds of games a set, this was probably a fun thing to go for. I mean, the amount of times I see people in my chat, prismatic check the Soul Fighter, check the Star Guardian mana, check the BA, check everything like that. I think it increased interest in the level of prismatic because before, prismatics felt like inevitable like an inevitability that people are like, well, I guess they hit 10 Portal, or I guess they hit 9 Demacia, or I guess they hit, I guess I'm set Revival 12 Jade or something like that. They win the game. And it feels like this inevitability, but there's kind of like will they actually hit the prismatic? So there's a little bit of anticipation and tension there now, which I appreciate. But if you're like a player that plays less than like, my wife plays 40, 50 games a set. She didn't even know prismatics were in the game. She just didn't even know that they were there until I started talking about it. It was like a week or two into the set. She's like, wait, there are prismatic traits in this set, because she only plays like 40, 50 games until I started talking about it on stream, and she's like, oh. For the next set, we're sort of splitting the difference using a new mechanic to synergize with the way you're traditionally hitting prismatics that should feel more intuitive while maintaining the rewarding appeal of KO of Coliseum's prismatic power. Lastly, the frequency. Interestingly enough, the actual rate of hitting prismatic traits hasn't shifted that much since Cyber City. It's currently sitting between Cyber City and Into the Arcane, which means we're not dealing with these harder / less obtainable to get on paper. But instead, their perception is that they are far harder to hit. We've got a couple theories around this, but the leading one is that when activation feels more complicated, players interpret that as less frequent access, but the set's still alive for a bit, so you still have a shot at chasing them before we're on to the next one. That's how they get you. The casino is open for 2 more hours. You still can hit the jackpot. Keep gambling. Shoma has 1,500 games on live. It's different when you're a dedicated, hardcore competitive player. Also, I would say that Shoma plays a little bit too much, but you can still win. You can still win. They have the jackpot in bold font, like $42 million in this slot machine alone. You can still hit. You still have a shot. Cue it up. Nice try. Who's even writing this section? Who's even writing this section? Nice try, Michael.
More dogged again.
NT. Great bait. All right, where are we at? Roles revamped. Reflections. Lavis. Attack on Tower. Thank you, guys. Hey, tacticians. Giovanni Scarpati, game designer and lead roles on Roles Revamped here. Just chat about that. Love Giovanni. This guy's the GOAT. Roles Revamped was a quieter yet very impactful experiment with the goals of opening up more design space in our champions that could allow us to better balance to define melee carries, fighters, tanks, etc. But the project as a whole entailed a few more things. Yeah, this was actually one of the biggest changes to TFT, and it was largely invisible. I agree with that. At least it felt invisible. Even though we knew that was happening, it didn't feel like as prominent. Like, this is actually one of the biggest things that's updated to TFT in quite some time. It feels almost as big as like either taking out a core item or even changing like level intervals, like gold and economy, stuff like that. Like if you get changing win streaks, this is like one of the biggest things, but it felt kind of invisible. We'll see what he says. Mana regen is a stat. This just went over well. It was intuitive change and a long time coming. We had already been using mana per second as a stat in TFT on a few items and traits, and its value as a core stat was just healthier for TFT than starting mana because it represented consistent power over combat instead of a burst at the start, which notably had a large impact on combat pacing. It's also so nice that attack speed now is not the best stat on backlane casters, finally. That's true. Attack speed has been traditionally so OP, and that is why anything that like a lot of times some of the most broken metas were when attack speed became too good. If you remember Jarvan from Galaxies in set 3. Some of you guys have been are old enough to remember the Jarvan, the Darkstar Jarvan would cast and give your entire team a bunch of attack speed, and that broke the game, right? You guys remember Spirits from set 4 when Spirit gave your whole team attack speed, that broke the game. And there's a lot of like many examples of that when just like when you get too much attack speed, it just breaks the game. And that was largely due to the fact that attack speed as a stat is just like sort of broken for like what it does, because it gives you a bunch of DPS increase and also lets you cast faster and things like that. And so instead they can actually create more ways to get power besides just attack speed for like mana. So it's also why Rageblade for a long time was like such a fascinating item, because Rageblade also allowed you to cast more on top of attack. So anyways, tank aggro. A simple rule that tank wins 50-50s on choosing your next target. Allows players to place melee champions on the front row instead of the second. Another free win. You mean I can place a melee unit within melee range of enemies now? Yes. Yes, we do. And you should be doing that in many scenarios. Yeah, well, that was true when they finally got it right. Before it was actually still kind of buggy, but they eventually got there. So basically now, if you played Yone, who's a melee fighter, he doesn't get targeted over Leona, and so you could actually front row it. That created some problematic fight matchups for certain comps, but overall I would say that at least it's consistent now, because before it felt like so RNG. Updated roles. The changes to the roles are interesting because they were supposed to be impactful, like solving edge case problems while also being invisible, which didn't change the way you played TFT too much. Surprisingly, despite these concepts being at odds with each other, this has been rather successful. Gone on are the days of drain tanks where you stacked a bunch of Omnivamp on a startup fighter. This allowed us to design fighters more often in TFT, knowing they're a bit safer, and now dealing chip damage to enemy backliner isn't a bad thing for you to do. They view, I mean, okay, I want to say drain tanks are actually one of the cooler power fantasies of TFT. It's been some of the most iconic things about some champions that have, like, if you remember some of the most iconic things about TFT, a lot of them were drain tank situations. Drain tanks mean that your carry is your tank and you use healing to get back your HP. And so I do miss a little bit of that just because it feels like a cool power fantasy to lean into. Very similar to, like, if they took out Rage Blade. I think a Rage Blade infinite scaling through attack speed is also a really cool fantasy. It just feels like it's a really good one. So, for example, if a potential drain tank that existed in the past that was like really, really strong. Actually, isn't every dragon in set 7 a drain tank? Like, historically, I think Shidoyu was, Siphon was, you know what? Never mind. I'm cool with drain tanks. I'm cool with drain tanks being gone. That's not to say that we landed all stats perfectly on release, and there's assassins which we're still cooking on. But overall, we feel this was a positive change for TFT, and we'll continue to tinker in this space to find out exactly what's good, looks good for these roles. As our comfort level rises, we'll be cooking up even more cool stuff related to these changes. Lastly, a bit on reception of roles revamped. As we mentioned with this announcement, we want this to be a largely invisible. Oh, so they wanted to be largely invisible intuitive change. Okay. I mean, that makes sense because they don't want it to be like a disruptive, like I have to relearn the game thing. Made itemization easier, open up design options for melee carries in the future. Well, that future is almost here, and the verdict is in. The overwhelming majority of our platinum players were aware of roles revamped, whether it's how its tanks functions or the new mana regeneration stat. That's a huge win for the system buried in the inspection panel. Okay, so Riot said, Platinum Plus players, you guys can read. And that is quite an indictment for our unranked to gold players, though. For our unranked to gold players, even though they were far less aware, they reported having a far better understanding of what units do based on their roles and what items may be good on them. We're super thankful for KO Coliseum being tested ground for this system, and we're excited to share the new designs we can cook up in the future at a future time. You know what? I don't think they have that better of understanding. I just think the gold players and below may have some really stylish yet informative guides and help in order to get them through some of the other things. Just saying. Not sure if they necessarily understand what they're doing here. The style of an anime tournament. We know theme is super important when players are trying out a new set. So we have Tori Arrow, gameplay art director, and Isaac Wood, art lead, for KO Coliseum to talk all about it. That is true. Do you guys remember at the very beginning of the set, there was like a coalition of people who like got offended that they called this an anime set because they thought the art was bad, like the outline shading and everything like that. I'm just gonna say that I don't know. I think TFT might look really weird when we get off that art style. If they choose to go off that art style, we're about to read it, but it might look kind of interesting. We have 15 sets of experimenting with themes, some successful themes of our players, some incredibly resonant for smaller portions of our players while neutral for others, and others falling short for the bulk of our players. At the end of the day, we know not every theme will resonate with every audience, but we also see exploring new themes as a necessity for keeping TFT fresh. Agreed. Not every set can just be Runeterra. I think that'd be boring. It can't just be Noxus and Bilgewater and Shadow Isles and Ionia every single set. Different themes are good. So whether the anime tournament style of KO Coliseum was resonant for you or not, just know that we continue to experiment with a mixture of aesthetics and themes in the future. I don't speak for everybody in TFT, but I would like them to do anime 2.0, not anytime soon. Years down the road, maybe when there's new, better IPs out, they could do it. But I feel like they could do it again and do it a lot better. And who knows? Maybe we even have a better mechanic that can go with it. But in the end, I think that we could do another theme like this somewhere down the road, and we could do it. We could use more than. I feel like a lot of the anime theme was like a just a bunch of references to Dragon Ball Z. It was like, if you actually look at it, like, I feel like I'm like, there's another Dragon Ball reference. That's another Dragon Ball reference. That's another Dragon Ball reference. And then there's like 2 of like the other stuff. As for KO Coliseum, the set's theme and visual style was met with mostly positive praise. As a team, the vast majority of us identify as anime fans or weebs, hold for shock, which is awesome because it turns out many of our players like anime, hold for more shock. But being anime fans also makes our players tough critics. Most of you know your stuff, and for some, the execution missed with key complaints around the aesthetic matching fighting games instead of animes or being too old school of a look. All fair critiques, not totally. There was actually a lot of players that said that. That was actually true. So like, a lot of people just kept saying like the arts, like people were like saying like as an anime fan, this is offensive that you even call an anime theme set. One of our big goals for KO Coliseum was to bring the straight out of anime look to our beloved characters in look, but especially in gameplay. This is our first ever full style pass across every champion set. That meant new shaders, new outlines, and a ton of iteration to get the look right, make sure it didn't interfere with gameplay clarity, and make their abilities resonate in a similar style. Every champion had an anime pop to build out their anime moment when you popped out a power fruit on them. Actually, wait a second. I wanted to actually they blew past something that I think is worth talking about. The key complaints around the aesthetic matching fighting games instead of animes is I'm pretty sure that a lot of what this set design was driven was because, and this is just a theory, I never got confirmation of it, but if you just like if you connect the dots, I'm pretty sure 2XKO, Riot's fighting game, was supposed to be coincided with like the launch of this set. That's why, I mean, they brought that, like the aesthetic matched it. That's why 2 fruits is the mechanic. You get 1 fruit and you get another fruit. And that's why they did a bunch of, every 2XKO champion is in the set. I mean, I made this connection like a couple weeks ago and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I missed that. But, and then they did the fruits introduction as well. So it's just like, it was supposed to be like a thing that lined up, but because I think they had some delays in 2XKO, which is its own problem. We're not here to talk about that. TFT kind of just got like, well, we're just doing it. And that made me think about, what would the set look like if we only had 1 fruit? Warwick, Blitz, and Teemo, those were added though, after though. Like they were added after they had introduced. Never mind. They like it was already like a big part of the development process. They added those like after when 2XK already had done like their alpha lab and released everything like that. But what made the anime style truly stylish? Here, the shader work was pivotal. Every champion was touched, and the new outline tech became the final puzzle piece to really hit anime. That tech isn't one and done yet. It's something we can bring forward into future sets. But beyond the shader, we also deliver on some key traits to represent various anime archetypes. Here, Mighty Mech nailed that robo/mech vibe. Every unit has bespoke colors, combining into one big, glorious mech. Jarvan is the drill that pierces the heavens. Karma is the spinning battle top, or that chainsaw style spell that continuously slices things up. Those combined with the existing Mash Justice skins for Lucian, Senna, and Yone brought the Chase striking color palettes to life. Our superpower or power up in making this all happen is our team's extensive anime knowledge. We've got sports anime super fans. That's me. That have seen more ball sports on anime than I knew existed IRL. We've got Shonen Arc diehards and little monster collecting fanatics to make sure each champion and origin feels distinct and lovingly crafted. All this from the shaders to the monster trainer was hard work that the players noticed. For us, that made it a win we're celebrating, and the style approach we love to revisit in future sets when the theme calls for it. One last thing to mention, the top 4 ceremony. We've always wanted the top 4 to feel like more of a win because it is. And I mean, you are guaranteed 10 LP with a huge sigh of relief you skip the 4th place at a single digit tactician health. It's true. I like the top 4 ceremony. That was really good. Being set in an anime tournament was a perfect time to bust out a thematically resonant top 4 ceremony. So with the help of our Whiskers-inspired visual style, we did just that. And the ceremony was a huge success, with the vast majority of players saying they liked it, and a large portion saying they made it top 4 feel more like being a winner. I think that was a great change. So with our next set, we'll be bringing the ceremony back, but with a more evergreen, set agnostic style. So keep an eye out for the next time you take one of the 4 big W spots in a lobby. Boom! I like that. I want the top 4. I feel like the top 4 ceremony could even be better, but you know, they could do small things like allowing you to dance or something like that, or I don't know, just make it. I feel like it'd be kind of cool. At the end of the day, KO Coliseum, because sometimes when the top 4 ceremony, it's just like the things just like the avatar is just standing there. kind of lifeless. I think it'd be kind of cool. At the end of the day, KO Coliseum gave us new tech, new style, and a memorable set theme that drew upon our fandom of anime and League. Not everything hit perfectly, but the ambition and experimentation got us to the lofty goals of bringing TFT into an anime tournament. And whether you loved it or are ready for something new, or both, we're excited to keep cooking with wild and fun future themes. All right, well said. I mean, overall, I like that. More things to buy? Well, believe it or not, I, in general, don't spend enough money on TFT relative to the hours. I actually don't even spend that much money on TFT. So I'm okay with that, personally. I know a lot of people might think that, like, aren't you like a whale? I think I kind of am, maybe, but like I haven't spent money on TFT in, like, I think years. So, Alshin's Ascent Reflections. Hey everyone, Christina here, product lead on events, to talk about a little legend that reached great heights. We were beyond humbled by how many of you climbed, fell, dusted off, and went for summit with Alshin's Ascent. The mode peaked with as high as game hours as the Remix Rumble Revival, which is pretty cool because hours had to be accumulated by solo play. That's true, instead of double up or anything else. But we're not really alone, that we got a trusty guide at our side. Wait, what is this? Oh, is that the Alshin's Pantheon? I never actually played like Alshin's Ascent. I played like to the end of the first time, but I didn't really like actually do the full on thing. So Zoe, our most popular guy, was also believed to be the most OP with her random loot drops. However, when we checked the data, and we did, Zoe wasn't nearly as consistently powerful as Teemo. Weird, right? Wait, Teemo, the reroll one? With Soraka as a close second across all their variants. I guess Zoe's popularity is a tale as old as TFT. Deep down, we cannot resist the risky highs and lows of absolute chaos. I'm pretty sure it's because Zoe is the most fun. Zoe basically gave you, like, loot subscription. And because she's the most fun, the most players play it, and that means the most bad players play it. But, like, not... when I say bad, I mean the players that aren't prioritized winning. The players who are learning are probably the ones that are also playing it. Whether it was Zoe or Gwen or even our shield slamming Pantheon, we were blown away by just how many players committed to climbing the summit with 12 guys to achieve the Guide Master reward. Results like the number of summits the mode had, along with the positivity we're seeing online, were really exciting for the team. Alshin's Ascent was our first real crack at PvE progression-based mode, and we're both happy with the results. Feels like we learned a lot, more content, more challenging content. Agreed, I want more challenging content. And yet have a lot left to learn. We don't have solid plans for what may be next explored in a similar space, but if and when that changes, we'll keep you updated. I think overall PvE was a success. I think they could do more for it. I would love to see it enter its like own, like, I think, like, I mean, honestly, the one thing I'm kind of scared about is that it ends up being like a huge money sink, and then they have to like monetize it aggressively, and that would be like a bad thing if it feels like they have to monetize it in a greedy way. But if PvE ends up getting its own development, I would like to see it kind of like what Path of Champions did for Legends of Runeterra. Although I guess if they make it better than Path of Champions Runeterra, then they might be cannibalizing themselves. But I really like the roguelike element of it. I think roguelike TFT sounds like really fun. You made it to the summit and the end of the learnings articles. Congrats. These articles can never be written in a vacuum, so thanks to all of you who've been writing and sharing your feedback, because we've been reading it a lot. We hope that it shows when we write long pieces like this. Your feedback is crucial in helping us achieve our shared goal in making TFT the best game it can be. And on that note, we hope you see continued improvement in our next set and beyond. So until we see you in Runeterra, good luck and have fun. Looking for TFT girlfriend, serious. Oh, man. El Hermano, the classic. All right. I mean, I'm pretty sure they addressed... If you guys missed the beginning of it, we have a TLDR. Here's a TLDR that we skipped at the very beginning. Power-ups. On release, the set mechanic was praised for its dynamic and fun nature, making a champion feel like an anime protagonist. But as the set evolved, the set's complexity, high burden knowledge, and inconsistent options revealed the need for clearer tuning and more emphasis on agency and flexibility. It's true. Flexibility was not... Chaos Coliseum was not as flexible a set as we would like, and while we worked on improving flex play throughout the patches, we failed to hit the mark for many of our competitive players. And as we look to the next set, we're taking care to make sure our traits feel viable at lower breakpoints, allowing for wider gameplay. We also guarantee there'll be far more flexible champions in the next set. They wrote this twice in the article. Sharp and meaningful design. Reflections on artifacts. Artifacts have created balance changes for a while, and as their power made certain champions feel mandatory unplayable without them. Going forward, we're aiming to lower the power gap between champions with and without their go-to artifact, making them less extreme and more flexible across a broader range of champions. Okay, so they're kind of trying to address artifacts, make them less sharp, make them less like only playable on this one champion, which is good. Bugs, ambition, content, the Pioneer tax. We create a ton of ambitious new content with more combinations than ever before. But the Pioneer tax, the concept of things going wrong when you try something new, of building something new, combined with compressed timelines and resources, led to fewer finalization days. Lulu, I mean, Monster Trainer. They basically talk about the Monster Trainer stuff. Prismatic trait reflections, some wins, some losses, but overall we're going to reserve quest style gameplay for just a few prismatic and be more intentional. Roles revamp was a success. Anime style art brought new visual tech and personality. Some of the biggest wins are the top 4 ceremony, it's true. And then PV was good. We're probably going to bring it back. All right. I mean, overall, I think that this Dev Learnings article addressed like pretty much what we want to hear. I guess they didn't really miss anything, right? Is there anything... Oh, the one thing I will say is that there's one thing that I wanted to say about this set on top of everything else, which is that they want to introduce these like champion specific things to try to make it more exciting, like fan service. They introduced like some KO 2x KO things, or just like more like this fruit is for this champion. But when they do that, what they end up creating is a more conditional like hero augment dynamic. One thing about fruits that sort of evolved, I actually thought they compared to anomalies, right? They basically, because like power-ups is kind of like, oh, you choose a buff on a champion, but it ended up, in my opinion, I said this a couple times throughout the past few weeks, but I think the set has actually completely transformed into a hero augment set, because there's one fruit on one champion that changes the way they play, and it unlocks like a specific thing for them, and that kind of created more of the power gap problem. So I like the idea of introducing content in the middle of the set to try and make certain champions more interesting with a unique take and things like that. And they have introduced more hero augments halfway through a set before. It's not even like unheard of. Sometimes they've introduced hero champions in the middle of a set. But when they added so many, it just kind of created this like... It just kind of created this situation where there's just a bunch of like these hero, effectively like these situational conditional comps that were very knowledge burn specific, and you couldn't really play it very often. And a lot of times it was even bait, right? Like who here has played a like the Starry Night Rel or like the Denting Blows Vi? It's like all these different kinds of things. And I think there's like they're like fun, but in the end, it ended up just contributing more to that problem. They never addressed that, but I feel like that's something I want to add to the conversation, because for design considerations, I feel like they don't have to do that. I feel like less about like only this champion can do that, and you have to farm this specific thing. But we'll see.